The year 674. A massive fleet of the Arab Caliphate, invincible at sea, approached the walls of Constantinople. This was the armada of the powerful Umayyad Caliphate, which had already seized Egypt and Syria from Byzantium. Their confidence was absolute. They prepared to deliver a fatal blow. But from the Byzantine ships, it wasn't arrows that erupted, but roaring streams of liquid fire. The flames clung to the wood, impossible to extinguish with water. On the contrary, water only intensified the blaze. Panic engulfed the fleet. Ships burned, people jumped into the water and were consumed by the flames. This was not a battle. It was an annihilation. The world witnessed for the first time what would later be called Greek fire. The Byzantines themselves called it more modestly pir thalassion, or sea fire. The pejorative name Greek fire was given to it centuries later by the Crusaders, who encountered its terrifying power. It was a technological marvel of the Middle Ages. Imagine napalm, but 1,000 years before its invention. It not only saved the empire from imminent destruction, but also became its main trump card and most closely guarded secret for 700 years. When the empire fell, the formula was lost. Forever. How did a civilization without modern chemistry create such a complex weapon? And how did it manage to keep this secret under wraps for 7 centuries? Why, even today, with spectral analysis at our disposal, can we not confidently identify its exact formula? We have gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, but even these provide no definitive answer. We analyze residues on ancient ships, but cannot distinguish traces of the weapon from those of ordinary ship tar and pitch. This is a story of technology, secrecy, and knowledge that can be lost forever. To understand the origins of sea fire, one must look at Byzantium in the mid-7th century. The empire was on the verge of collapse. Ironically, just a generation earlier, Emperor Heraclius had achieved a triumphant victory over the Persian Empire, returning the true cross to Jerusalem. Now, all those lands were lost. From the south, the young and ferocious Arab Caliphate advanced, having already absorbed Syria, Egypt, and North Africa. Their fleet reigned supreme at sea. Constantinople was the next target. Byzantium didn't just need a weapon, it needed a miracle, and that miracle appeared in the form of a refugee. Chronicles name him Callinicos of Heliopolis. He was a Greek architect or alchemist who fled to Constantinople from Arab-conquered Syria. According to the Chronicle of Theophanes the Confessor, it was Callinicos who offered Emperor Constantine IV the recipe and the device for projecting liquid fire. He was not a scientist in our modern sense. Rather, he was a bearer of the fading scientific tradition of the Hellenistic world, a fragment of the knowledge from the great library of Alexandria, passed down from master to apprentice for centuries. Although the exact recipe is unknown, textual analysis allows us to hypothesize the main components. The base was most likely crude oil, which the Byzantines called Median oil. It was extracted from regions east of the Black Sea, possibly near modern-day Baku, where oil had seeped to the surface for centuries. Pine resin was added for thickness and stickiness, sulfur to intensify combustion. But there was also a secret ingredient that made the fire impervious to water. Until this point, naval combat was essentially land warfare fought on decks. Ships would close in for boarding or ram each other. The Byzantines were the first to create a long-range weapon that destroyed enemies from a distance, turning ships into helpless torches. This was a revolution in naval tactics, comparable to the advent of the aircraft carrier in the 20th century. Sea fire became the first tool of asymmetric warfare. Now, a dozen small ships could put a fleet of hundreds to flight. The rules of naval warfare changed forever. The enemy couldn't even approach the Byzantine fleet without risking incineration. It was absolute technological superiority. But the secret wasn't just in the mixture itself, but also in how it was delivered to its target. The Byzantines developed the siphon, essentially the first flamethrower in history. This was a massive bronze device mounted on the prows of ships, often shaped like the head of a roaring lion or a mythical dragon. Using a hand pump, similar to blacksmith's bellows, and a system of pipes, it ejected a pressurized stream of burning liquid for dozens of meters. This was not magic, but engineering ingenuity rooted in the developments of Hellenistic geniuses, like Ctesibius of Alexandria. The siphon operators, known as siphonarioi, were an elite, specially trained unit of the fleet. Their lives were dedicated to one task: spewing fire. The very sight of a roaring, dragon-breathing fire was a powerful psychological weapon. It was this device that decided the outcome of the first Arab siege. For 4 years, from 674 to 678, the Caliphate's fleet blockaded the city, but every attempt at a sea assault ended in disaster. Byzantine dromons, with their siphons, emerged from the bay and burned Arab ships by the dozens. The invincible fleet was almost completely annihilated. The victory was so resounding that Caliph Muawiyah I was forced to conclude a humiliating peace. He didn't just retreat. He committed to paying Byzantium an annual tribute, including gold, elite Arab horses, and slaves. This was akin to the United States today, paying tribute to an adversary after a failed invasion. The effect of sea fire was not only physical, but also psychological. Enemies described it with superstitious dread. The loud roar, thick smoke, and unquenchable flames all created the impression of divine or diabolical intervention. Arab chroniclers described it not as ordinary fire, but as roaring thunder flying through the air. They believed the Byzantines had made a pact with dark forces, and this fear was no less effective than the fire itself. Byzantium actively fostered this myth, transforming Greek fire into a weapon of strategic deterrence. Although primarily used by the fleet, the Byzantines also employed handheld versions, kyrosophons, in the defense of city walls. Enemies desperately tried to obtain the secret. Arabs and Bulgars captured ships and engineers, but they only managed to create weak imitations. No one could reproduce the entire system, the correct composition, the precise pressure in the siphon, and the tactics of its use. In the 9th century, the Bulgar Khan Krum captured 36 siphons and even a supply of the mixture itself from the Byzantines. But it was useless. They had captured the gun and the ammunition, but they didn't know how to assemble, load, or aim it. The secret lay in the know-how, not just the equipment itself. Another demonstration of its power occurred in 941, when the vast fleet of Kievan Prince Igor approached Constantinople. The Byzantines met it with just 15 old ships equipped with siphons. The outcome was predictable. Chronicler Liutprand of Cremona, an ambassador from Italy who was either an eyewitness or heard first-hand accounts, wrote that the Rus, seeing this horror, cried, "Better to perish by the sword than to burn in that flame." They preferred to throw themselves onto Byzantine swords rather than jump overboard into the fiery sea. Greek fire once again saved the capital, reaffirming its reputation as an ultimate weapon. For Byzantium, sea fire was what nuclear weapons are to modern powers, an absolute guarantee of national security. Therefore, its formula was not merely a military secret, it was a state doctrine, elevated to the status of a religious dogma. In the minds of the Byzantines, it was a sacred gift, almost like the Ark of the Covenant, bestowed by God to protect the new Rome. To reveal its composition was not merely an act of treason, but sacrilege. We have direct confirmation of this. Emperor Constantine VII, Porphyrogenitos, in his work De Administranda Imperio, on the administration of the empire, addressed to his son, explicitly forbade sharing this knowledge with foreigners. He wrote that the recipe was shown and revealed by an angel to the great and holy first Christian Emperor Constantine. To make the warning more convincing, he recounts a story of a nobleman who dared to share some of the knowledge with enemies and was immediately consumed by fire descending from heaven right in the temple. This was propaganda of the highest order, aimed at its own elite. So how did they keep the recipe a secret in practice? Through strict division of labor. Some workshops extracted oil, others prepared resin. A third group cast bronze siphons, and only a fourth group, perhaps a single family or clan that passed down knowledge through generations, mixed the components. No one outside this narrow circle knew the entire process from start to finish. Imagine an assembly line where workers installing the engine never see those who make the chassis. And only one family, directly subservient to the emperor, knew how to put it all together. The empire also tightly controlled the supply of key ingredients, especially oil. It was a state monopoly. Byzantium controlled Crimea and the trade routes in the Black Sea, essentially controlling the oil fields of that era. Any merchant attempting to illegally export Median oil risked not just their fortune, but their head. The low general literacy rate also helped preserve the knowledge. The recipe was passed down orally and through practical training, rather than via blueprints that could be stolen. Such a system was incredibly effective, but it had one vulnerability. It depended entirely on the stability of the state and the continuous transmission of knowledge. If a key family of masters perished from plague or in a civil war, a portion of the information could be lost forever. The recipe was like a complex program, stored not on a disk, but in the memories of a few individuals. Any system failure, an emperor's assassination, an invasion, economic collapse, could irrevocably erase key lines of this code. The technology was strong as long as the empire holding it was strong. But what happens if those hands weaken? And they weakened in the most tragic way. The decisive blow to the secret was delivered not by Arabs or Rus, but by brothers in faith. In 1204, the army of the Fourth Crusade, instead of fighting the enemies of Christianity, captured and sacked Constantinople. They burned libraries and destroyed arsenals. The masters, the bearers of this knowledge, were killed or fled. The centralized system for producing and guarding the secret collapsed overnight. The weapon that had protected the Christian world for centuries was destroyed by the hands of Christians themselves. After this year, mentions of sea fire become rare and vague. It seems that the original recipe was irrevocably lost. When the Byzantines recaptured the city in 1261, it was no longer a great empire, but a shadow of its former glory. They lacked the funds for a fleet, relying instead on mercenaries from Genoa, and entrusting the primary state secret to foreigners, even if someone still remembered it in detail, would have been madness. Meanwhile, a new force was entering the world stage: gunpowder. Cannons were effective both on land and at sea. They demolished walls and sank ships from great distances. Crucially, gunpowder was a democratic weapon. Its recipe, saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, was simple and quickly became known to all. Any king could hire a founder and acquire cannons. Greek fire was an elitist, aristocratic weapon, inextricably linked to a single empire that was now dying. By the time of the final siege of Constantinople in 1453, the defenders, it seems, no longer possessed sea fire. Their main adversaries were the giant cannons of Sultan Mehmed II. Particularly notable was the bombard basilica, created by the Hungarian engineer Urban. This 8-meter-long monstrosity fired 600-kilogram cannonballs. Against such power, old technologies were helpless. There was a grim irony in this. An empire whose symbol was fire was perishing under the fire of a new, more advanced technology. On May 29, 1453, the city fell. It was the end of a 1,000-year empire. With it, the last bearers of this knowledge perished. If written instructions for producing sea fire ever existed, they likely burned in the chaos. But the secret didn't live in a book hidden in a palace. It resided in the hands of masters, the keen eyes of engineers, and the experience of the siphonarioi. When these individuals died defending the walls, the secret died with them. It wasn't written, it was embodied. The curtain fell. Today, historians and chemists are attempting to reconstruct what was lost. They analyze Byzantine texts, Arab chronicles, and study archaeological finds. The main theory suggests it was an oil-based mixture, thickened with resin. But what made it unique? Some believe unslaked lime was an ingredient. Upon contact with water, it releases a tremendous amount of heat, igniting the mixture. There's also a more complex hypothesis, the use of calcium phosphide, which, when it contacts water, releases a spontaneously igniting gas. This would explain why water only intensified the burning. But even if we know the ingredients, we don't know the proportions. Chemistry is a precise science. The wrong ratio would make the mixture either too thick for the siphon or too thin and useless. The Byzantines refined this recipe for centuries. Without their cookbook, we can only speculate. Any modern reconstruction is merely an educated guess. It's like the recipe for Coca-Cola. We can analyze the drink and say it contains water and sugar. But we don't know the exact formula that gives it its unique taste. Beyond the chemistry, there's the engineering. We don't know the siphon's exact design. What pressure did it generate? What alloy was it made from to withstand the heat? What nozzle design created a stable stream? We don't have a single surviving example. All our understanding is based on stylized, non-technical depictions in manuscripts, such as the famous Madrid skylitzes. It's like trying to reconstruct a Ferrari engine from a child's drawing. Enthusiasts and scientists have conducted experiments. A 2002 project demonstrated that a mixture of oil and resin could indeed be effectively sprayed through a reconstructed bronze pump. But these experiments only prove the theoretical possibility, not the Byzantine method itself. One of the main conclusions from these tests was how dangerous this weapon was to its own users. The slightest error in pressure or a valve malfunction could turn one's own ship into an inferno. This demanded incredible training. Sea fire wasn't just a substance. It was a complex: the substance, the delivery device, and the tactics. We have lost all three elements. The success of sea fire rested on three pillars: its unique chemical composition, its advanced engineering system, and a rigid state monopoly. It was a three-legged stool: chemistry, engineering, and security. Byzantium's enemies always lacked one of these. The Arabs had oil, but no siphons. The Crusaders had engineers, but no recipe. No one could hold all three elements simultaneously. Therefore, sea fire wasn't forgotten overnight. It faded along with the empire that gave it birth. Political chaos, economic collapse, and territorial losses dismantled the complex production system. Knowledge, passed down by a narrow circle of masters, proved too fragile. Perhaps the secret wasn't so much lost as it became obsolete. By the 15th century, even if someone had found the exact recipe, investing resources in a close-range weapon was pointless when Turkish cannons could sink ships from a mile away. The story of sea fire is a powerful reminder that knowledge can be lost. We are accustomed to thinking of progress as a continuous, upward trajectory. But this history shows that entire layers of ingenious discoveries can vanish if the civilization that created them cannot protect them. Sea fire is not alone in this pantheon of lost knowledge. Alongside it stand the secret of self-healing Roman concrete and the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer. These artifacts are like technological ghosts, reminding us that the line of progress doesn't always move only forward. And who knows how many more such sea fires, lost secrets, are hidden in the depths of history.